Oh, am I live? Oh, let me see. Go live. Okay, am I live? Go live. Okay, cool. Window. Okay, excellent condition, it's saying. So I think I am good to go. I am live. Hello. Welcome to the Black Ponder. Is there any way for me to make this light a little better? I am here in my bedroom. It's not too glamorous because that's the only space that I can have available to me. Problem is, I always have that Rembrandt effect where there's a lot of shadow on my face, but I don't have a ring light. Hello, I see Jeremy Borno is chatted. Hello. Yes, please let me know if there's some audio issues. I'm not sure if there will be or not. If you can hear me fine or not, just chime in. Okay, so yeah, this is the Black Ponder. Welcome. This is philosophy channel on that I do talk about philosophical texts, but I also do live streams about philosophy chats that are hangouts. I'm trying to think, is there any way that I can improve this light situation? I have that light on. I don't have my miniature light. My plant. Ugh. I'll just deal with the Rembrandt. You know, Rembrandt was famous for like casting shadow on people's faces. That was his thing. So, okay. So today's topic is, what is love? I mean, no. That was last topic. Yeah. This topic is God. What does it mean when we say God is love? Let me see my notes here. Pull up my notes. I just came back from another function, so I'm a little disorganized. But I think we should be good. What is good? How is that? Okay, cool. Got my notes. What it means to you for God is, and they got this annoying heart icon. That's going to be an issue. Let me see here. What it means to you for God to love us humans. Okay. Let's get at it. Sorry. It's 8 o'clock. That's what you're asking. Okay, first of all, let's make an announcement and a disclaimer, or just let us know right now. And this isn't like a conversion video. I'm not trying to, you should believe in God, and you should accept Jesus Christ as your Lord and Savior. This ain't that kind of video, right? This is a philosophy of religion. This is a philosophy channel. We're talking about philosophy of religion. So, atheists are cool, agnostics are cool, religious, non, people of any faith and any type of understanding of God is cool. Whether that's a personal God, a person, or like God is more of a concept or an abstraction, an essence. I think it's more just, we're just talking about it philosophically, right? I guess we'll talk a little bit about theology, and as you can see, I'm hand holding my microphone today. we're holding it free form, so that's so don't get too caught up in that, or in case you're worrying like, oh no, he's trying to evangelicalize me. No, I'm not trying to do all that. Just but I think it's a very interesting philosophical consideration when we talk about God is love. What does that mean? philosophically. And then you have, oh, hello, Nadia. I believe you have been asked this before, and I remember you not speaking too favorably about it. Uh-oh. But I'm wondering if you have a Goodreads. Oh, okay. Yeah. Goodreads, as it would be fun to follow along there with you. Yeah, I just don't want another social media account. However, if you want to follow along with what I'm reading, check out my Tumblr. I don't like social media, but I started a Tumblr. I will put a link to my Tumblr. I actually post quotes from what I'm currently reading on my Tumblr. Now, I know it's not like Goodreads where it lists, the books and like it doesn't like make my reading like a metric. You're not going to get like some list of what I've read, what I'm currently reading, what I'm finished reading, what I have read, and what I want to read and did not finish and all that stuff. You're not going to get that. But you will get what I'm currently reading and what I have read. So let me see. Copy link. And I'll put it on the live stream. There we go. Ooh, man, that is a lot. I guess this will work. Just push enter. Oh, I can. It's over my. Wow, that's annoying. Okay. You gave me some crazy link. Okay, we'll get to the God is love concept. Let me just post it. If you want to follow along with what I'm reading, this is the best way to do it. Tumblr. I like Tumblr. I think Tumblr is cool because it's random. It's like it's not. It's more like a free-form blog style. I know Tumblr's kind of not everybody's thing anymore. Yeah, I'll let you know. If you got a Goodreads. I have this annoying aversion to metrics and measuring. I guess I'm kind of not. I have this weird obsession against like productivity. It's good to be productive, but I don't like just quantifying of people's output of what they're doing and like using that as some sort of way to, because you can fall into all these traps of, oh, I'm trying to be well read, but that's just me. That's my personal thing. I know a lot of people like Goodreads and they use it well. That's why I'm not even gonna get up. But I also have a fitness watch that my wife bought for me, and it's great. It keeps track of a lot of, but sometimes it gets a little annoying where it's like, you've met your goal today. I'm like, I didn't even set. Why are you telling me these things? Like, I didn't tell you to do this. It's a little, keep a track of. We got to make sure that you're working too hard. And it's like, who the hell are you to tell me that? I don't know. I don't like it. But that's my thing. Okay, so back to the topic. God has a soft and kind energy that heals. Oh, okay. So you are Jeremy? Are you a religious? Sounds like you're a religious person. Okay, so. Okay, yeah. So let's talk about some context, because we had 2 live streams before that I felt like was necessary to talk about this one. One was what is God, right? And the other one was what is love. Let me check. What was the live previous? Oh, yeah. Oh, we had 3. Wow. Who or what is God? That was the first one. The other one was, what is free will? And then the final one was, what is love? Oops. me close that. Okay, that's good. And then go back here. Oh, you don't consider yourself religious, but you do feel that God has, or you feel like God has a soft and kind energy that heals, or is that just, are you just that's like how you think other people who believe in God think? Right. Okay. So we talked about who or what is God, and then I just, for me, it was more about the personhood of God, where it's very important that God is a person, not so much a concept or like an essence. Although maybe you could bring that up if somebody feels that way. How like, oh no, God is just the expression of love, but it's not actually a person that is loving. I think it's it's important to look for this the whole God is love idea, to consider God as a person, because when we talked about love in the live stream, we were talking about how it's about this mutual, it's kind of like this mutual aid that was going on, this type of giving and receiving, where it's not one directional. It's like both the giver and the receiver. The giver is the receiver, and the receiver is the giver, and that's what this love is. This cycle where it is, love is not like a one way. Like I'm giving and you're not also giving. That is not love. So for that to happen, so that's why there needs to be a person, because for that to happen, there needs to be kind of relationship, right? So that's key, right? And so when we talk about what God is love, then we're talking about like, okay, because how we define love is this kind of mutual expression of giving compassion and kindness, and then receiving back from the person that we give kindness and compassion. So it's this relationship of two beings, at least. It could be more too. And then Jeremy says, I think that God is supposed to be the highest figure that cares, protects, and nurtures the human soul. Yeah, that's the idea, right? In many religions, like Christianity, where God is, all loving, or like ultimate, like all benevolent, right? God is a guiding spirit that leads people to the light. Yep. And then the famous verse in the Bible talks about, Jesus says, I am the way, the truth, and the light. Right? So even God is saying that, right? But here's a question that is a common question, right? You mentioned like God is supposed to be the highest figure that cares, protects, and nurtures the human soul. But so then why is there so much suffering and pain and like people doing evilness in the world then? Like, so that there's the conundrum right there. Why is there so much suffering and pain and trauma and like, people conducting evil acts, when there is when God is supposed to be the highest figure that cares, protects, and nurtures the human soul? What's that going on? All right. And then you respond, we humans are easy to to cause harm to others because of our desires. Okay, right. And we cause harm to each other. So, but then the question is, why does God allow that? Because of our desires that we suffer. People desire to be, and I'm actually, I'm not answering your questions in I'm not trying to ask questions to you in a negative, like, oh, you don't know what I'm actually, curious as to know, because it's a very important question, right? Very important question. So how do you feel about that? So human beings cause harm to others, but why does God allow that to happen? If God is all loving, cares and protects in nature and nurtures the human soul, right? And then you say, because we, is that right? I'll just mention this again in case I'm doing these pauses because there's this annoying. I don't know why they put this new feature on YouTube. Just came out. They have this emoji icon, and it's blocking the chat. I can't read it there because there's this emoji icon. Could I make that go away? I don't know. So I have to do some rearranging here because of our desire that we suffer. Okay, thank you. Guess I'll keep that open. So so you're saying that we humans have a desire to suffer? So why you don't, I mean, you can answer that or you don't have to answer that. But okay, so let me give you my perspective based off of like a lot of theology I've been reading. And this is why, so we talked about what is or who is God, and then we talked about what is love, and then we also brought up the concept of what is free will, right? And I propose, or it's not me that proposes, it's just I'm getting these ideas from several philosophers of religion and theologians, that it's due to the free will, right? So for love to exist, there needs to be a kind of way to there needs to be a freedom that exists as well. You can't love somebody if you're not free to do so, right? And so that necessitates, so the existence of love necessitates the existence of free will, right? Now, so for you to choose to love, right? So you then choose, you can have the choice to love or not to love, right? You know, so you can choose not to love, right? And so what happens when you choose not to love? When you're like, nah, you know what? This love thing ain't really. I'm gonna do other things, right? Now, this is the result of suffering, right? Now, so the question is like, well, why is this allowed to happen with the all benevolent God? Is the reason why it's not so much allowed, is just like, this is what love is, right? For love to exist, there needs to be free will, right? There needs to be like the option to choose to love or not, right? If there's no option to choose to love, then you're not really loving somebody, right? You're just kind of like a robot or like some sort of like computer program or something. You're not really truly loving. Now, the problem with this idea is now you have to buy into the notion that free will exists, which, you know, there's arguments that say like, well, free will doesn't exist. So there's that we can go on that route if you want to go further in that, but I'm just let's stick to the topic I'm talking about, where it's, so if you choose to not love, then the result is suffering, right? And so the thing is like, the choice to not love is a profound choice, because it's not only affecting yourself, right? Choosing not to love is like is a decision that affects others as well. So your actions to like reject love can harm other people, right? So pain and suffering can be caused by other people's decision to reject love, right? And so this is how like pain and suffering is magnified, and this is how like people who innocent people suffer, right? Because of the free will that others are exerting, right? And it isn't so much like an allowing to happen. It is just like it's just a consequence. It's kind of like, for example, if you want, let's say you're like, okay, I want a triangle to exist, right? I'm gonna make a triangle exist. Right? So, for a triangle to exist, then there needs to be 3 sides, right? Because that's what a triangle is. It's a 3-sided shape. So the triangle necessitates the existence of 3 sides, right? There is no such thing as a triangle that has 4 sides, right? That's just not a thing. So you gotta look at it like that, where it's the same thing when you look at love. It's like, well, there is no conception. Love doesn't. For love to exist, there needs to be free will, right? So there's a necessitation of free will, and for free will to happen, so people can choose to love or not. And if they choose not to love, then that results in pain and suffering, and so that's a necessitation. So there's this necessitation that happens, right, as a result of having love exist, right? So that's what's going on, right? Right. That's kind of like where that's a theological argument, or like a philosophical religious argument to like, how does pain and suffering exist when God is loving? Because of that. Let me catch up to some of these comments. And then the Vibe, hello Vibe. I believe our human understanding of God limit us to see what is a God is. We subject God to certain judgment that are humanly, but not necessarily so. Are you saying like, because that's I don't know, I didn't quite get what you mean when you say that, but are you saying we really don't understand that God's plan, which is a common argument with a lot of religious people. They'll say like, well, we can't understand the mind of God. So what we think is unjust and unfair is really just, we just don't understand, right? And if we had a grander vision of what, if we had better understanding, it would all make sense. And I'm not sure I buy into that, to be completely honest. But I buy into the idea that, our minds aren't limited. We have limits, so we're not going to understand everything about reality in the universe, of course, right? And if we're talking about somebody who has infinite knowledge, then yeah, we're not gonna. But I think we can just, I don't really, to say, the counter argument is like, why is there so much pain and suffering? Well, it's because you don't understand, right? And you don't understand the grand vision. Like, well, I mean, is that a loving relationship? Right? Is that like a loving? Well, you just don't understand. I don't know. To me, that's like not a loving relationship. But maybe I'm wrong about that. I don't even know if that's what you meant, but there you go. And then Kendra, hello. Study Tibetan Buddhism. When you die, you are confronted with clear light. Your reaction to this is what leads you to your destination. You ascend or continue. Okay. I have featured some Buddhist philosophy on the channel. Some of it is Tibetan, not all of it. Now, for my understanding with Buddhism, they are kind of more agnostic, or they don't really, Buddhism doesn't focus on God or deities. Like, even in Buddhism, even the gods have not reached enlightenment yet, right? They're even still trying, they're not at the level of the enlightened, the Buddha. So from my understanding, from what I've read, I have friends who are Buddhist, they tell me like God is a non-issue for us in our spiritual journey. So, but I guess that's more of a free will thing, what you're bringing up. And then Jeremy Borno, grace is what allows people to have free will because grace prevents people to be harsh to people. Grace is what, I understand. What do you mean grace? I know, like, when I went to Sunday school and they talked about the concept of grace, it was like unlimited, like unconditional love is what grace is. Like undeserved love, that's grace. Kind of like this perfect love, which as I've gotten older throughout the years, I'm not sure if that's really a thing, or like, is that a thing I really, like, I don't know if, because this idea of like, well, we receive love, but we don't deserve it. I don't really vibe too well with that, to be honest. Because to me, that's like, then, so what is this all about then? Like, I guess it's about like, ultimately is about whether you deserve love or not. Like, is that what this is all about? Or is this about like, I just have this, I'm about, I'm building this loving relationship with somebody. Whether or not I deserve it is, that's something else, right? Yeah, sometimes I feel like that's a bit problematic in my philosophy journey, religious journey. But then you say, grace prevents people to be harsh to people. You're saying like grace is what people use to not be harsh. So if they don't have grace, then they will be harsh to people. Is that because people are definitely harsh to people in real life, but you're saying like grace is what allows us to not be harsh to people. Is that what you're saying? And then Kendra, suffering is to be relieved. Always, your job is to relieve suffering. Yeah, that's good. I don't not agree with that. Yeah, I think that's, it's always nice to, relieve some pain. But you're saying not love, but relief, right? Oh, yeah. Now, so that's another thing. So I don't know if I vibe with that. Well, some people would argue like, well, that's what love is. First of all, like some people would argue that like, well, love is, the reduction of suffering, harm reduction. That's what love is. Some people would argue. I would argue though, like, I guess when you look, you kind of have to look at it long term, because sometimes you do have to suffer to achieve things, objectives that result in, sometimes you have to make sacrifices for people, right? Because it's just the reality that we live in, right? And so when you're sacrificing for someone that you love, then you're permitting yourself you're allowing yourself to suffer as a result, right? And that's a form of love. Like, you don't want to be so obsessed with that where it becomes like selflessness, and you after a while you do need to like check yourself, like, am I burning myself out with doing this? Like, is this the right way? But sometimes it's like, I do think like in the long term overall, like, like you want to reduce harm, in the long term. But I do think like sometimes you do have to suffer sometimes to achieve certain loving goals, right? So I don't know how you feel about that. But you're saying, so that's maybe, so then you're maybe making that distinction where it's like not love but relief. So you're saying, so maybe you agree, and so you're saying like, yeah, that's why, like, when if you have to do that to then it's more important to relieve the pain than it is to love. Right? Is that the argument you're making? You cannot love a robot, though, Neil. Love is made to be conscious and free of bondage. Right, exactly. That's what I'm saying. Like, I agree. Like a robot, or whatever. A being that does not have free will cannot love. I think, because like you're saying, you have to be conscious and free. To be able to love, and that's and then I bring up the whole, like, that's why there's the concept of liberation theology, and like social justice movements kind of focus on that, where it's like they're trying to enable people to be freer in their existence, because ultimately by allowing people to be freer, then it increases their capacity to love. So the more freer you are, the more able you are to love, right? And if you're not free at all, then the less the less freedom you have, the less opportunity you have to love, right? Because love is a free action, right? So I agree. Compassion is Kendra. So you're saying there's a difference between. Oh, you're saying so the relief of suffering, that's compassion, which is different from love. Is that what you're saying? And hello, Kang Thumper. We often give God, capital G, capital O, capital D, superhero attributes. We also say God considers what is beneficial for humans. What ideas do you have that lead us to these assumptions? Salute, by the way. Okay, so I assume the assumptions are superhero attributes and beneficial to humans. Oh, so these are all assumptions based off of faith and belief, not fact or evidence or even like logic. Well, a little logic, but not logic based off of some of it is based off of evidential. It's because, so I'm a firm believer in the Jesus story, right? Jesus, the Son of God, comes to earth to say, like, look, I'm God, which is like, and so that's kind of like how I've been compelled. It's like, so God came to this world as a person, as a human person, and all God ever did was love. And he was saying, this is what God is. Like, I am God. I'm this loving person that accepts people who I just want to give love, and if you want to receive love from me, then we're cool with that. Right? And so there's like the superhero aspect to it, and that was very compelling to me. Without the Jesus thing, like, it's hard for me to accept, to believe in God without the whole Jesus story, because then God becomes more like this abstraction that's like, it's hard to relate and connect. But with Jesus as being this person who experienced the same things that I experience on earth, and like was with this message of like love, that I can jive with. So I guess that would be like, that's where it leads me to these assumptions. But these assumptions are just totally based off of a belief and faith. But I will say, like, throughout my life, offering compassion and kindness and love has, given me a lot more, benefits in terms of like emotional, mental, spiritual benefits, as opposed to like when I respond to things with violence or hatred or like, negativity, like that has not resulted in any good thing for me ultimately. So it's kind of like, well, the proof is in the pudding. It's like, and I'm not, of course, I'm not saying like you can express love without like a belief in Jesus, but I'm just saying like that's how I got to the point of like being accepting the love, making those kinds of assumptions. So that's me. Where are we here? I think we skipped. Now I gotta scroll. The chat kind of went forward. Let's see. Can I just push up? No. Okay. Where is the scroll bar? Okay, here we go. Oh no, I lost it. Okay, there we go. All right, so the vibe says, my point is, I guess we judge God in our limited mind. The problem of evil is one of those judgments we subject to God. Right. And that's a valid argument. Yeah, so again, like, yeah, so you're basically just saying what I was saying. Like, we're saying like this problem of evil is a problem, but it's only a problem because of us and the way we think. But maybe you're saying like to like an omnipotent being, like that's not a problem. It's like, you would say like an omnipotent being is like, dude, like I already got that worked out. Right? You just don't understand. Basically, I don't know. I just don't. To me, that's like, is that really a loving relationship? Like, is that like an ultimately loving relation? Like, if you have omnipotent power, right, and you can love infinitely, then is that how you express love to somebody? Like, okay, you're suffering, but I got that. Like, you just don't understand why, but it ultimately is good. You just have to trust me on this. It's like, I don't know. I think like somebody who's like omnipotent would be able to like. To allow you to figure that out for yourself, and so then you can like really like open yourself completely in a person to person, because like we were saying, love is kind of like this person to person relationship, this mutual loving relationship, as opposed to like, well, inferior superior type of like kind of dominant subordinate kind of thing, which I understand, like, well, an omnipotent being by default is superior to you, but I don't know, I think the love thing kind of levels things out, which again, I just go back to the Jesus, like one of the reasons why I vibe with that is because he leveled the playing field. It's like, you know what, I'm gonna like bring myself down to you, right? Because I want to relate to you on the same level as you, right? So I think so that's important in my mind when we talk about love. Like, there needs to be a kind of relation that we can. To me, is like when people say like, well, it's God's plan, you don't understand. Like, I can't relate to that. Like, I can't. But I guess people would be like, well, then that's on you, bro. Like, I trust, but I don't know. I don't see that as a good foundation for like building a loving relationship. But that's just me. And then we got Kendra says, oh man, can I just get that? Okay. Karma is attraction and repulsion. Love and hate are strong words. Are you saying like I should use attraction and repulsion instead of, those are better words to use instead of love and hate? Those are very strong words. I don't know. I think we should use strong words. I don't see a problem with using strong words. I think, sometimes I I think sometimes people aren't direct enough in conversations. I like to be very direct in conversations. Yeah, like gotta be like, let's just get to the point instead of like, being careful with it. But I don't know. We don't know who God is. We've never met her. It doesn't matter. Well, yeah. So, are you a Buddhist? Because you talk about karma and Tibetan Buddhist. Or Kendra, are you a Buddhist? Because if that's what you believe, that's what you believe. Let's see. The reaction you have when you are presented with clear light is all that matters. Okay, so I'm guessing you're a Tibetan Buddhist, but let me please confirm that for me. And Kang Thumper says, I believe God is love, at least from what my mother shows me. She has faith and reverence for God, but to be honest, I don't really think all her sacrifices she makes for me wasn't demanded by God. So you're saying like your mother loved you not because it was from her own free from her own motivations, but rather is because I believe in God and God wants me to be a good mother, so I'm going to be a good mother for God. Is that what you're saying? And then Jeremy Borno says, I also think God is peaceful, and I'm sure all religions value peace. Let's think about, I guess, the major ones. Christianity. Well, does Christianity value peace? I guess it depends on what type of Christianity. Because, like, first of all, the Crusades, that wasn't peace. So, yeah, I mean, shit, let's just focus on Christianity. Does religions value peace? I'm not sure about that. I mean, wars are started because of religion, right? So, yeah, I don't know. I question that one. I mean, peace should be the main goal. But, sometimes religion, like, is the opposite of peace, honestly. So, Kendra, love is strong. Love is strong. Yeah, that's true. I don't really discuss that. Love is oh, you're saying you don't discuss your religious beliefs. That's fine. Love is attachment. Yeah, somebody else was saying that. So I guess that's the thing. Last time when we had what is love, somebody else was saying like, yeah, love is attachment. So I guess that's I've never really heard that. Where I mean, I understand like how somebody could see it like that. Is an attachment. I feel like I talk about this in the last stream or one of the streams where we talk about what is love. Whichever one that was, I lose track. But I think it's more than attachment, right? It's kind of it's also like a mutual benefiting of each loving party. I don't know. I just think of attachment, and I think of like a bondage, or like, which I guess that's some people use the word bondage in a very loving way, but it's kind of like more it's kind of like a pet relationship, where if you have a pet like a dog, like after a while, or like for example, my dog. First you have this like, oh, it's it's just a pet. It's just, that's all it, it's just. But then after a while, it kind of evolves. I literally use the attachment because he's on a leash when I walk him, so we're attached in that way. It's almost like, I guess I'm attached, like a ball and chain type of thing. But I think like it evolves, right? It becomes like, well, you're not just my pet, you're like my buddy now. You're my friend. We rolled together. I enjoy being around you, not because we're attached necessarily. It's just because I enjoy your company, which is I think that's you're now like I don't know. Maybe I'm overthinking it. But attachment, I get like vibes of, oh, here's the ball and chain, or like, yeah, I'm just like leashed to this person. I think it's like it's more to it than that. Jerry Borno is, we can reduce suffering by learning to be peaceful and appreciating silence. Uh-huh. Yeah. That's true. I don't see yep. That makes sense to me. And then Kendra. So we're in the human realm. Equal parts good and evil. Greed is what landed us here. Well, greed is definitely the source of a lot of problems. you know. And I do think, like, yeah, you need to get fundamental in that way. Sometimes when people say, like, well, that's too simplistic, but no, I think it is greed. For example, some people blame capitalism, like, oh, it's capitalism for the problems. Yeah, no, it is capitalism, but let's like get even more fundamental than that. It's greed, right? It's like you're so obsessed with gaining whatever, like that you'll exploit people, and capitalism is just sometimes I think when you obsessed over, sometimes we obsess over like certain things and we forget, like, well, these are based off of like people and their like emotion, they're like misguided obsessions with themselves and like power, which is greed, right? And so what happens, like, using the capitalist thing, like that's why you see like system, socialist states, like they fall victim to a lot of the same things, because it's like whatever system social economic system you're in, like you're always gonna have to deal with that greed problem, right? It's not like, oh, we don't have capitalism, I guess we're not gonna have any greed anymore. No. I'm not, I'm no cheerleader for capitalism, but I'm saying, like, I think it's important to be that fundamental, where it's like, look, greed is the problem here, right? Which is like not love, right? And then Jeremy Borno, I suggest that for the next hangout, we talk more about peace, coupled with people being reclusive. I can add that to the list. Yeah. Do y'all get? I'm sure y'all get these too. Where is this? They're like these. They're like these chats. They're like spam or phishing or whatever they call these things. Is like, hello, I'm Elizabeth. Hello, I'm Elizabeth's good friend. I'm Emily. Are you Ellie? And they try to like respond, and it's like I get these all the time, like random people I don't even know who get my number for, it might just be like a program that just cycles through like random numbers and eventually they pop up. It's almost like I block them all the time, but it's like I'm sure that they're just these computer programs that just keep randomly going through. So it's like it's no reason to block, but I do it anyway. Anyway, oh yeah, I was gonna record your what is peace? Reclusion? I'll say, what is peace? And how does it compare to reclusion? Sure. I'll add that to the queue. Okay, and then Kendra, we have an important choice to make. We can follow good or evil doing. I choose good. Evil is too nasty to survive. Well, that's good. But then, you gotta like extrapolate further. Like, what is good? What is evil? Because those things aren't always clear. Sometimes people do evil and they think they're doing good, and sometimes people think they're doing good when they're actually doing evil. So that's something you gotta like examine too. And then the vibe. Neil, people can love inanimate object because it benefits them. A loving God, in my view, shouldn't necessarily be a person. What do you think? Well, first of all, can somebody love an inanimate object? I remember I was saying, like, I love my PlayStation 5. Well, no. You don't love the inanimate object. What you're doing, but I mean, this is just my opinion. Like, maybe you can. I think really what you're doing is if that inanimate object, like let's use the example. I talked about this before. I play, I like playing video games. Right. And currently I got a PlayStation 5 to play the newest Final Fantasy 16, which I think that's only, it might actually be on the computer, available on computer, the PC. I think it probably is, but it's also on PlayStation 5. And then I'll say I love PlayStation, but really what you're saying is I love myself because it's self-care, right? And you can totally like love yourself. In fact, I argue like you have to be able to, you gotta love yourself before you can truly like love others. Because what is it to love another person if not to love yourself? Because true love, and then we talk about this in the light, is a mutual exchange of compassion and kindness. So not only are you giving compassion and kindness, but you're receiving it back, and it's helping both parties, and that's what true love is. So like if you're just like giving compassion and kindness and you're not getting it, then I'd question like, is that love? Or is that like a selflessness, which is not, I would argue love, right? It's kind of like it can also be kind of be a form of self-harm, unless like that really brings you joy and happiness. But then wouldn't that drain you after a while? Unless maybe it invigorates you. That's the only way I can see it. But I don't know if that's even a thing that can happen. So I would say like my point of view is like, well, you have a good relationship with this inanimate object, but really is that inanimate object is giving you joy. So really it's like you're expressing love to yourself, which is you can have a relationship with yourself, right? And you can have a mutual like benefit of, the cycle of yourself, which is, I think is like something you definitely should seek and work toward. And then you say, a loving God, in my view, should not necessarily be a person. What do you think? Yeah, I do think that, God is necessarily a person, which, that's just a faith thing. Because, you might think of God as something else, which is, that's cool with you. Because that's my understanding of love. Like, because love is this mutual exchange between, it's this relation. It's really like love is, you need to be in a relationship, and I'm not saying relationship in just the traditional, like, going on a date with somebody, being in a marriage. I'm taking like more generally, like even like when I was talking about my dog. Like I have a relationship with my dog. It isn't merely like some attachment, and that's it. Like I also have an attachment to, my pair of pants, because it's attached to me via a belt. Right? I don't love my pants. I mean they're cool. They're cool. I don't love my, but so it's not just an attachment. It's like it's a relationship where we both exchange compassion for one another, right? And so I acknowledge the personhood of my dog, which, you know, now you're getting into it's. So, you know, when we talk about personhood, we're not just talking about like humans. We're talking about acknowledging the thing as a subject, yeah, as a, you know, which the subjectivity of that's what makes the thing a person, right? Because their capacity to love, to provide compassion and kindness, and, you know, all types of other things. So that's why I think like God necessarily is a person. And then Jeremy Borno says, love should always be peaceful. It shouldn't involve pain and suffering. Yeah, no, ultimately, I mean, that's ultimately the goal, right? That's true. I mean, ultimately, you do want that. I'm just saying, like, you also have to understand the reality of the world that you live in, right? And this world is, you know, it's a world there where you just have to suffer sometimes. Even like, you know, to get biblical, right? You know, when Jesus was on trial, he was telling Pontius Pilate, the person that was trying him, Jesus said, I mean, he must have sounded crazy to people, but he was saying, I'm an alien of this world. Like, I'm an alien of this world. Like, this is not my world. That's what he said. People were probably like, what the heck is he talking about? But I think what he was saying is that he's acknowledging, like, this world is like a world where, like, to love somebody, you have to sacrifice. You have to, like, experience pain to express a kind, you know, sometimes, which, you know, he you know, he definitely did. But, you know, he's saying, like, he's trying to, like, that's the acknowledgement of being in this world. Like, you know, sometimes you just have to do that. Like, you know, I have a job to support my family, right? And I don't necessarily like going to my job every day, but I do that. And one of the reasons why I do that is because, well, I love my family. And so I subject myself to it. Now, I'm not saying I don't work in like a coal mine or anything like that. So it's not that bad, right? But some people do work in like really bad jobs, but they do that to support their family. They're like, I hate my job, but I have to do this because I love my family, right? And I think that's a love. That's love to do that. Now, you know, it's just that's, you know, it's too bad, right? It's too bad. Like, that's not. It's a shame that love has to be expressed because of the world that we live in, right? Because of the decisions that people make, because of the free will again. Because we live in a world where, you know, you have to, like, you know, get a job. You know, you gotta, like, have money to get basic necessities, which is something that was set up to us by people in power through choice, right? So we just go back to the, like, this is why, for, you know, suffering, because, you know, it doesn't have to be this way, right? You know, we could just, you know, the whole argument, anti-capitalist, like, socialist argument is we should just be able to have basic necessities like food, water, shelter. We shouldn't have to work for them. I agree, right? But we live in this world where we have to do these things. We have to suffer to provide. And so it is a kind of love to do that. But, you know, it is a problem. I'm not saying, like, well, you know, that's good. I'm not saying that's good, right? We should kind of, you know, I believe we should fight to be in a world where we can love without suffering and pain. Like, that would be the world I'd like to fight for, right? But that's just not the world we live in today, right? But yeah, definitely want to fight toward that goal. But I definitely would say, like, you know, like somebody who has a lousy ass job is like, I'm just here because I you know, I have to, like, this job is giving me, you know, medical insurance to provide for my family because whoever family member is suffering through an illness and I need that. So I'm going to this job. Like, to me, that's love. That's love, and the person is kind of going through some sort of suffering to do that. That's love. Yeah. And then Kendra says Jesus had to be human to die. That's true. Yep, that's definitely true. Jeremy Borno, in your view, is God's love passionate? Yeah, I think so. Particularly when you look at the story of Jesus, right? I think that's a very passionate, the way he loved. He's like, like what we're saying, despite like the trials and tribulations that he went through, he's like, I still want to love you despite like all this, and that's the kind of passion, right? Which is, where that word comes from in the biblical sense. So I think so. And Kendra retracted several messages, so I just see sometimes, I don't know what that's referring to. God's love was probably pragmatic. Well, I mean, yeah, it kind of goes back. It's kind of why I fell away from the church. The whole idea of like, the whole like he had the suffering and the dying to save you from your sins is a pragmatic point of view, and I don't, that whole idea of like, I don't vibe with that, because to me it's like, well, and so now we're getting like philosophical about it. And I know some religious people would be like, well, now you're entering the mind of God. That's a sin. You shouldn't be doing that. You don't know how God thinks. But I'm like, well, if we're talking about love, right? And God is this omnipotent, like all powerful being, like pragmatism is like irrelevant, right? Like, I mean, right? You would think like, well, God needs to be pragmatic. No, he does. God is all powerful, right? So God doesn't have to be pragmatic. God can do whatever that God wants, right? So I don't know. I don't know about that. So that whole idea of like, well, God had to do this to to express. God didn't have to do anything, right? God is all powerful. He can do whatever he wants. I mean that. So I don't know about that. That's how I interpreted God's love was pragmatic. I don't think so. I don't think there's nothing pragmatic about God, nor is God like subject to pragmatism, because God is all powerful, and God is not limited to like the confines of anything, including like some people think like, well, you gotta love to, there needs to be some terms, and like, no, right? Like God does what God wants to do, and God wants to love. There's nothing pragmatic about it. I mean, that's how I see it. I don't know. M.A., hello. Good convo. I'll summarize my thoughts. I think to understand how God is love, reword it as God is perfect love. Here, perfect love is selflessness. And I disagree with that. I don't think, and we talked about that in the What is Love? I don't think love is selflessness. I think selflessness is selflessness. Like giving yourself up for somebody else without like any expectation to receive anything in return. That's not love to me. That's like a kind of, and it's kind of like toxic, right? And at the same time, you're like, well, what you're doing, that's selfish. But it's not selfish. It's not selfish to want to have kindness and compassion given back to you. Like it's just good to receive kindness and compassion from the people that you love. And when you feel strongly about somebody and you're not receiving kindness and compassion, when you're just completely rejecting yourself, like that's not love. That's like a kind of toxic relationship, right? But the problem is, like, yeah, we have this idea of Christianity today that kind of is like that, like, oh, God is selfless. But I mean, that's like, and so now we get into all these problems of like superiority and like, violence is like, the way toward love, and like a lamb for the slaughter, and like all this weird obsession with like violence and like punishment as like a route to love. Right? I mean, that's kind of what happened. Like when the selfish is like, well, somebody had to be punished to receive, for us to be allowed to receive God's love. Like, to me, like that, not only does that not make sense, it's kind of like toxic in a way, which is not love to me. So I don't know. I don't think selflessness is love, but that's not my opinion. Man is incapable of perfect love. That's true. But perfect love is the ideal Christ called us to do. Yeah, I don't think that. I just think Christ or God, or however you want to refer, just wants to form a relationship with us that is a loving relationship. And of course, that's, for us, it's going to be imperfect because we're imperfect beings, right? But God's okay with that, right? So there is like a power imbalance. There's like, it's not equal. The love exchange is not equal, right? Which is fine, right? But God still receives something in return, not because God needs it, but because God wants it, right? Because that's the nature of love, right? That's how I feel. And perfect title for our next hangout. So yeah, you're referring to my notes, I'm guessing. Part of love, including God's love, involves being open and vulnerable. I agree. Being vulnerable and open is definitely part of love, and and Jesus did that. So again, like, I could just go back to, the life of Jesus was very compelling to me. And like basically what made me a Christian, all the abstractness of God the Father, which is, I mean, that's cool too. Sorry, my throat is I got a frog in my throat. God the Father is good, and then of course, and then you talk about the Holy Spirit, which is like very abstract, right? Which I could do. Abstraction is. It's fun. I mean, I'm into philosophy, which is all about abstraction. A lot of it has to do with abstraction. That's fine. But, Jesus kind of made it more practical. They like brought it down to like human level. And, Jesus was very vulnerable and he was open, right? So I agree. It's difficult to love someone who is closed off and comes across as too strong, don't you think? I agree. That the whole like a hierarchical kind of love, or it's where it's like, I love you from this high place. And I'm not going to ever go down to your, I'm going to go down to your, I don't think Jesus did that, right? Jesus was like, no, I want to like get to know, I want to love you I want to meet you where you are, right? And that's the way that God was able to love in that way. It's like, so yeah, I agree. Kang Thumper. When I think of the concept God is love, I think the worst thing that happened to Jesus was to turn him into something supernatural. Care for the poor, health the sick, protection of the weak. Yeah, no, you're on to that. These are the ideas of Jesus, which I agree with from a logical perspective. It serves the greater good. I don't think Jesus had to walk on water to understand being a jerk to humanity isn't very smart. Machiavelli, who, and I did go off on a rant on one of the streams. So I agree 100% what you're saying. And one of the reasons why I kind of fell away from the church, but I'm still Christian, but I fell away from the church, is just the idea, like, the whole obsession with Jesus dying on the cross and being tortured to death, and like, oh, this is the gateway to heaven, and that's all you're focused on. Like, so you don't care at all about like Jesus helping the poor, or like, some of Jesus's best friends were sex workers, Mary Magdalene. It's all in the Bible. It's like not like hidden or anything. He hung out with people in poverty. He criticized rich people. He was like a minimalist. Nobody, these things aren't discussed, right? And then, he ultimately he was killed by the state. Nobody talks about that. He's like, because he was threatening social economic power. He was trying to he was like a social justice warrior. Nobody wants to talk about that. He was very down to earth and human, right? But and that's what makes it real to me, right? But like you're saying, just the obsession of the supernatural, right? That just kind of turned me off. Because then God is like abstract, and like it's hard to love like somebody like that's kind of you can't relate to, right? At some level, right? So I agree. And then the vibe, self-love, as you said, is a relationship with yourself based on your perceived goodness, and self-hate is the opposite. If God is love, we are expecting love from him, but what good have we done for him? Oh, you do good to God by forming a relationship with God, right? And you do good for God by doing the things that Jesus taught, like what I'm saying, like helping the poor. If you help the poor, then you do good to God. You do good for God, right? If you don't be up. If you reject greed and you say, you know what, I don't need all this stuff. Like, all this stuff doesn't mean a lick when I don't even love my neighbor. If you do that, then you are doing good for God. That's what God wants, right? That's what God wants. He wants you to love, right? So when you express love, you are doing good for God, right? And that's where the mutual benefit comes in, because God is like, yes, that's what I like it, and he talks all about this in the Bible. Like he says this all the time. Like, it's not like this is a secret, right? So he asks, Jesus says, he asks, like, this is what you need to do, because this is what I want, and this is what my Father wants, and this is how the Holy Spirit and all this. So what can you do good for God? Like, it's all in there, right? In the Bible, I'm talking about. Right. It's not like we're detached. See, that's why I'm trying to like get out of the notion that we're detached, or God is like unreachable, or because God has infinite power. Like, you can't have a kind of meaningful relationship, or like a relationship that is mutual. Like, that's just not a thing that can. But that's bogus, right? Because it was, what has been said in the Gospels, right? So you can definitely do good for him. Absolutely. All right. That's what God wants. And then MA. That's why I prefaced it with saying perfect love. Love is not perfect love. Well, I mean, God's love is perfect. But, right. I believe. And then we talked about, like, before, earlier in the stream, we talked about, well, if God's love is perfect, then why this pain and suffering? But we talked about that. Check that out. Or if you want me to repeat that, feel free to comment. Selflessness. Selflessness isn't love. Shaking my head, I promise I won't tell my mama. You should tell your mama. You should have those conversations. You should be like, mama. But maybe that might draw some trauma. So I don't know your situation. But I always have, I have deep conversations with my mama about stuff like she disagrees with. I'm like, yeah, mama, I don't know if I agree with that. I don't think so. We're striving to be like Christ, but it is impossible. To follow God is to love others and to love God, but to say God is love is to say God is perfect love. He is the ideal. Yeah, okay. But we're striving to be Christ-like. Sure. I don't know. I think that's kind of because, like you said, being like that standard is impossible, right? So really, you just want to be like, I just want to do the things that you taught, you know. Which is not like outside the realm of possibility, right? Like you were saying, helping the poor, not that hard to do, right? Loving your neighbor as yourself. I mean, that's it can be challenging to because of that, because we're raised in a society where we're taught constantly we're supposed to put ourselves first above. So to break out of that social conditioning, that's hard, but it's not impossible, right? All types of other things, things that a lot of what Christ taught was like not like super crazy hard to do, right? Uh, so I don't know. I think Kant, and then Chris, hello. I think Kant said something interesting regarding ideals, along the lines of ideals being nothing but ideas in our head, and that in are only useful as model to be adjusted according to lives experience. Mm-hmm. Yep, he was all about that in terms of ideals and as models. I'm trying to see how that is relevant. I'm missing where that is relevant to what we're talking about. And I think you're trying to make a point about what we're talking. But I'm missing the point. Oh, maybe you're saying because of perfect love is the ideal, but yeah, but you're saying we can only achieve a certain level of love. I don't know. I think like the whole perfect love again is like I think that's kind of toxic. I think that's also a misguided understanding of what Christ taught, right? I don't think Christ was like saying like you need to be, I want you to be like me, because of course that's impossible, right? Rather, he's just like saying like, look, your focus in life should be love, like that's where you should be focused, and love is the way to happiness, is the way to spiritual success, right? It's not power, it's not wealth, it's not like greed, it's not like selfish, it's love, right? I mean, that was his whole thing. And so like he didn't say like perfect love, he said just love, like and helping people, and like sometimes we do obsess over I think that's also misguided, like the whole like, oh, Christ is this model of love that's perfect, and how could I ever why are we even obsessing over that? Like that's not what's important. What's important is just loving each other. Of course we got this model to work off of, Christ, but like we don't have to reach that because it's impossible. We can't. We just have to it's an example, and we got the example to work off of. Let's try and be like it. Of course we're not gonna perfectly match that, but at least we got something to work off of. And then hard to communicate in short bursts. Hope you understand. I think I tried. Jeremy Borno. If we focus on being equal, we can love people purely. Yeah, if we focus on social equity, yep, I think so. If we understand that, fundamentally we're all the same despite all of our differences, we all want to be loved and to have and to to be loved and to love someone. I A lot of people said that, but I know Mr. Rogers would always say, that's what I remember, the first person to say. We all want. There's two things everybody wants. That this Mr. Rogers, Fred Rogers. Everybody wants to love, and everybody wants to be loved. Those are everybody has that in common. So that's what he believed. Yeah, I think that's true. And so in that way, we're all, on that aspect, we're all equal. Right. And so if we can relate to each other on those fundamental ideas of fundamental wants, right, we're good. But we don't acknowledge that, right? We don't acknowledge it's like everybody wants to be loved and everybody wants to be loved. We put people in situations where that can't happen, and that's where the free will comes in again. It's like you got to enable people to achieve those wants. But when you put people in environments where they can't do that, then there's gonna be problems. Right. Chris says, I mean, in the sense that perfect love is abstract. Yeah, I suppose so. It's abstract. But I guess abstraction is different from unattainable. Because I don't know how is perfect love abstract. Because we have this model in the Bible that's not really abstract. It's unattainable, but it's not abstract. In terms of it's abstraction is is an approximation of something that isn't actually what it is, but it's music notes are an abstraction. Written music is an abstract because that's not really music. It's just an interpretation. Is a kind of interpretation, right? Or the laws of gravity, as we know, they're an abstraction. That's not really. They don't really describe gravity because we got all these holes. These mysteries about gravity we don't know because we're pretty confident it's what we know about gravity is kind of an abstraction. It doesn't. But the model of God, of the perfect love of God, is not I can understand that kind of love, that perfect, but it's just I can't because of the limits of my social conditioning and also just my imperfections, right? Yeah, that's just not gonna happen. I'm just not that strong of a person, right? I get it though, but so I don't know if it's abstract. Jeremy Borner, if we focus on having, I read that. And God sent his son to die for us, which is irrational by religious standards, but it represents God's selflessness. Yeah, so I don't really, I kind of got disillusioned with that story of, not that, because God is all knowing. So from how I interpret the story is, God knew that because God is all knowing, he knew if I go down on earth, they're going to kill me. I already know this. But it wasn't about I have to punish myself because I need to match the sins of the world. I don't buy that. But what I do buy is the sacrifice was I know they're going to kill me, but I need to teach. I want to teach them the important parts of life. So I want to show them where they can actually find happiness. And the best way for me to do that is by going down, or you're saying, sending your son down on earth to teach, because he was called the Messiah, which is Hebrew for teacher, right? Again, like people don't like, they don't like, nobody focuses on his role as a teacher, which is like he was called Messiah all the time, right? But, so I mean that was the important part, the teaching, right? But I do agree, like he knew that's what I'm saying. Like sometimes when if you in this reality, like to love somebody, sometimes you do have to suffer, right? Because he knew like they're gonna kill me, but I need to do this, or rather I want to do this, right? Because I want to teach them. So it was a sacrifice, but it's not like the sacrifice is framed like in this toxic, like weird, violent worship type of way, which I don't vibe with very well. Um, so to me, like, there's not selflessness. I mean, again, like, I'm not saying it wasn't a sacrifice like that. I mean, I acknowledge the sacrifice, and appreciative for it, but God wanted to, the want of teaching is a benefit. It's a kind of compassion, or a positive that God received. Like, well, at least I was able to teach the beings that I love how they can find happiness in life, right? And that was good for God, right? Oh, that's what I think. So that there was like, not because God was doing it for God as well, right? It wasn't just for us. I mean, it was for us, for the most part. But he got, God had that. God was able to receive some love back too as a result. Chris says, but we form it based on lived experience. Like, the only way we can form a concept of love is through lived experience. That's true. That's true. Yeah. All of our understanding is based off of our sense perception. I think so. Mm-hmm. Jeremy Borno. A lot of ancient traditions like cannibalism, incest. I guess you can't. If you type these words, they get blocked. Wow, that's crazy. And human sacrifice were out of selfishness and hatred. Yep, man, I agree. The vibe. Diogenes said, the privilege of the gods is their ability to not need anything. In some religion, God don't need our love. It is us who needs this. What do you think? Well, I don't think God needs our love. God wants. So one is different from need. Uh, you know. And I don't even think we need God, but meaning like you don't need to be happy, right? Or like you don't, so that's the thing too. Like, it's a choice, right? You can choose to follow God or not, right? So if you choose not to, then that's on you, right? That God's argument is like, well, following me is like, that's your quickest way to happiness. But some people will reject that, and God's, accepts that. This is the freedom. And in that way, it's like, well, you don't need me then. You can just go do your own thing. So in that way, it's like, again, it's like this mutual relationship of, and I think that's another thing that, institutionalized Christianity kind of doesn't really describe, because of course they don't want to say that, because institutionalized religion is like a power structure and they have a lot of power, so they kind of want you to like think like, oh, you have to be part of this, because if people think like they don't need them, then they'll not join the institution, that they'll have less power, right? But I don't think so. I don't think you need. Now, I personally, based off of my faith and belief in God, I'm like, yeah, that that's the better that's what you would want. But I don't, you don't need. You can, but then I feel like, well, now you got to deal with a lot of other issues, which you can kind of like have to find out answers in other ways, which can be hard. But people do it all the time, right? So, and then lots of people can't reconcile with the institutionalized propaganda of Christianity. They're like, it's just, I just can't deal with that. And of course I'm like, well, you can reject the institution and just, they'd be like, no, still no. So, I don't think either or needs. That's just my opinion, though. MA. Ultimately, the phrase "the God is love" was pulled from the Bible, and to make sense of it, using abstractions such as ideals work. But I haven't read Kant in any great depth, so I don't know what I'm answering the retort. So to make sense of using abstractions such as ideals, I don't know. I think like by grounding love in like beyond, like taking it out of the ideal and just like making it real in terms of like, framing it within experiences of love that, real experiences of love. I think that's a better way of looking at it. And I just think that's the point of the story of Jesus, right? Because he was a person, right, who loved people, directly, as the on a more like equal playing field in terms of like human being to human being, right? Of course, he's, the story is he still was God, but he was also human. And so in that way, the love was more, it wasn't an ideal love. It was like an actual, like, and I think we should look at it in that way. The vibe. Is the point of Christianity on the sacrifice of Jesus Christ or the message he preached? Well, that's my whole argument. Is institutional Christianity focused on the sacrifice of Jesus Christ and nothing else? They're like, Jesus Christ died to save your sins. Nothing. All the other thing that's in the Bible is irrelevant. It's like, where I'm of the position is like, well, no, what's important, more important is the message he preached. That's the most important part. And that's why that's why I kind of detach myself from the institution of Christianity. But I think the institution of Christianity would disagree with me on that point. That's how I feel. Chris responds, I see what you're saying, and I agree for the most part about the ideals meaning language. I just think the point of Kant's argument is that models have changed based on new information. Okay, like the Torah was probably considered God's perfect love, then rabbinic literature made interpretations. Jesus presented his as well, but did not speak to everything. Gay marriage, women's rights, etc. Right, and so I actually am of the opinion, like another thing that most the established Christian institutions for the most part would disagree. Like the Bible is this sacred text. It's like you need to like treat it as this holy document. No, we need to treat it as a historical document that has its flaws and has its historical context, and we need to expand and improve and address modern issues like what you're saying, gay marriage, women's rights. Like that's on us to like, okay, and now you're accepting the teachings of Jesus. Now you need to like, how does that apply to gay marriage or women's rights? Right, and that's that. Now we have to use our minds and be like, okay, well, if I'm applying the whole love, is the ultimate thing, then some of the old stuff that's said in the Old Testament about women's rights is problematic, right? And we need to like maybe censor that out, or like not censor that out, because you don't want to hide it, right? You want to acknowledge like, yeah, this was a book that we're not like acknowledge, this is not like something we consider good anymore. And that's happened before, like Constantinople did that, or Constantine, that whole, the whole sense, the curating of the Bible. The Bible had all types of books that were removed from the canon, right? So it's not like that hasn't happened, right? And it can happen again, right? Not quite. The Torah did not reveal Christ. God's work in the Torah can be considered unfinished according to Christian theology. God was pretty clear on his views on gay marriage. Yep, there are definitely verses in the Bible that say that directly that say homosexuality is a sin, right? They definitely. And so I'm of the opinion like, okay, just like there's also verses in the Bible that says if a wife cheats on her husband, she needs to be stoned to death. That's a direct verse from the Bible. These verses are based off of historical context of marriage and women, and like equating to property, and protecting dowries and things like that. And they just need to be like. And let's not say like, because I don't want to say like censored out, because I do want to like show like this is a thing that was in the Bible, right? And you gotta reconcile with that, right? So still have it there, but be like, this is problematic, right? And we need to not think this is good, right? But that's another convo. Oh, did I skip? In the context of history, Christianity was incredibly socially progressive for women's rights. Yeah, I mean, the bar was probably really low back then, but like now the bar is a lot higher. So we need to like keep up with the bar. Right. It's reckless to condemn people that we don't understand. True that. That's why Jesus said, do not judge people unless you want to be judged yourself. Right? So if you don't understand somebody, you're like, oh, that's just crazy. It's like, okay, but do you even understand yourself? Right? Agreed. Another convo, Chris. Also, I'm trying not to approach it from a religious sense. I also agree with Neil about critically analyzing the Bible and not reading doctrine into the Bible. But to conclude, people used Christ's broad teaching to create socially progressive movements, but it required a modern person and then to critically thinking. Let me see. That icon is blocking. Let's see. Paste. It required a modern person to do the critical thinking. Yep, and I have actually, I've posted several videos about, I think one is called Freedom Faith. I have some videos on theology that are about that, like modern theologians, women actually are isn't it ironic, like it's the women that tell us, or philosophers of religion that go into that, like talk about like using Jesus's teaching to critically analyze the Bible and like create new evolutions in theology, like liberation theology, for instance, which is based off of the teachings of Jesus Christ, right? But there are other theologies that are more modern, but they're not pushed by the old established Christian, because then it threatens their power, which is based off of patriarchy and all this, and capitalism and all this problematic shit. We want, we can go there, but let's conclude, as Chris says, because we've been about 2 hours now. So we can conclude. We talked a lot about the concept of God is love, and and as we want to remember, we're talking about religious and ideas. So it's when you talk about religion and deities and things like that, it's all faith based, right? It's all belief. So this is all like, we're in the realm of the speculative, I would say, and not factual evidence, which is fine. I'm all about that. So that's just to say, like, I don't have all the answers, or like, my idea of God is, I don't want to push that on anybody else's idea. But I am about, like, I really want you to understand my point of view, and I want to push the exercise of really, like, critically, like, think about why you believe, or what you believe in. Yeah, when you say God is love, well, what does that even mean? Like, what does that even mean? I think it's important to even think it through. Like, it's not going to be based off, it's going to be purely faith-based, that's like theology, where it's like, okay, we acknowledge that this is going to be not grounded off of evidence that's factual, observable, but we can still use some sort of logic and reason, and we don't have to just rely straight up on dogma, where we just, like, we throw reason and logic out the window. But yeah, so that's what I just would like to say. We could definitely apply logic and reason to religion, but with the acknowledgement that it's kind of hard to, like, frame our ideas in ways that can be universally accepted, because they're basically personal belief systems, right? So it's really just a personal thing. But if other people vibe with what you're saying, that's cool. You can definitely join up. But definitely I would like to honor other people's interpretations of God, or non-interpretations. That's cool too. And then MA says, do you plan on speaking on the problem of evil? Well, I mean, we did that in the beginning. Maybe you missed that part. I would encourage you maybe to listen to the beginning of the live stream, where we talk about free will and how that is necessary for love to exist. Because free will exists, that means people can choose not to love, and that introduces then the evil. All right. And then I also did a video on C.S. Lewis's, it's called The Problem of Pain, that also talks about that. So check that video out. God is loving, but he can also be unloving? ? Nope, I don't think so. But that's just my God. There is no unloving God. There is only a God, because God is love. So God is not unloving, right? Because that's outside the scope of what God is. You don't have to. It depends on how you define unloving. When your father disciplines you, is he unloving? Maybe, maybe not. Yeah, I guess it just depends on how is he disciplining you. What is the motivation behind the discipline? Is he using punitive discipline, or is it like, is it like, just reminding of my mama, which looking back, I agree. It wasn't that bad. It's like, okay, I guess you're not playing a Super Nintendo. I'm like, dang, But I'd act out. I'd do some bad shit. And my discipline was, well, we're locking up that Super Nintendo. That's discipline. But it's not like, severe, you know, abuse or anything like that. It's just like, I can't play my Legend of Zelda. She really knew how to get me. All right. Peeps, I'll check you out later. Thanks for watching, and tune in more for philosophical thought. Peace out.